All right, here we are in another episode of Flipping Houses for Rookies. Yay.
Yay, yay.
We are on podcast number 365. As Peter said last week, that's one day a week.
You can listen to us every day for a year
Yeah.
and then either be rich or shoot yourself. I mean, it's just,
Oh.
oh. Hey,
All right.
I've been in, hey, who hasn't done Herbalife and this thing and that thing? Systems are good, data's good, but you still got to do, you do it. And there's always somebody who wins and somebody who doesn't. So get off your butt and do what Bill says next. Go, Bill,
Right.
go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so here is today's title. How creative real estate lease options actually work. I think this is the final of my series, but I'm not 100% sure. I have to take a look. Actually, it is, because I know what I'm going to do a rerun next week, but I'll tell you about that later.
Oh, okay.
Here's the description. Yeah, we're going to have some fun on episode number 366. I decided that.
Well, yeah, we have to. It's day number 1 all over again.
All right, here's the description. Are you looking to unlock the secrets of the creative real estate deal known as lease options? In this standalone, eye-opening episode, we will be revealing some of the best known inner workings and showcase these jewels so you too can use them on your exciting journey to turn real estate into cash quickly. If this idea has piqued your curiosity, then this is your treasure map to a gold mine of creative real estate knowledge. Whether you are a seasoned real estate mogul or a newcomer, you are going to love this ride of controlling a property without owning it outright and learning how you can easily take money out of a real estate transaction instead of putting money into it. So if you are ready to discover a creative, flexible, and potentially lucrative approach to real estate today, this is a must listen to for you. It is time to unlock new possibilities and redefine what you thought and knew about real estate. Don't miss out on this opportunity to learn, grow, and transform your real estate game results. So tune in now. That's pretty impressive.
If you do say so yourself.
I didn't have time to practice this morning, so that was my first time through it. And I wrote it a couple weeks ago, so there you go.
That's fine. The worst thing that happens is you go a little slower, but it's actually easier to listen to somebody when they're not zipping through, so you can really hear what they're talking about. Right. Best lecturers are nice and easy, so you can hear them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do the housekeeping stuff first of all. There is a link in the description of a free document I'm going to give to you, which I'm going to explain to you in the podcast. I have made many coaching clients good students with this document. It's a 5-page document.
Mm-hmm.
This document will make you a successful creative real estate investor if you do as we describe in this podcast. And I promise you, it is not difficult. This is something you could do in less than a weekend. You could have deals by next month with this document. It is an incredible document. I have trained so many students with it. So I'm gonna reveal that to you today. I'm going to tell you, not only give it to you, but I'm gonna tell you how to use it so you can get the best potential out of this short training that I'm giving to you today for free. Okay?
Yep.
Also, make sure you subscribe to our channel wherever you're listening to us or watching us. Make sure you like us or dislike us if you so desire. I don't know why you would be here and dislike us, but people are like that. there are trollers that are out there.
Troublemakers looking for trouble, looking for
Exactly.
the word to grab onto to complain.
Yeah,
Crumb.
exactly.
Give me a crumb.
That-
I'll find a way to complain about it.
Exactly. The last thing is that we record on Thursday mornings, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we live stream on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you wanted to be part of the podcast, you could go to one of those platforms and ask your questions while we're doing the podcast. I do warn you, though, the questions that I'll answer will only be the questions pertaining to the podcast, because I don't want to. I have an agenda for the podcast, and I don't want to get off on a tangent on other things that don't belong to the podcast. It's not fair to the other listeners. If you do have a question, you go to flippinghouses4rookies.com and send in a support ticket, and I get those. And if you have a question for Peter and I, we will make sure we either address them on the next podcast, or or sometimes we write a whole podcast because of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a good question or have a topic, even a topic you want to know, send a support ticket and we'll do a whole podcast on it. Okay. So enough of all that. Let's get down to business. So we're going to start off today, Peter, Bill style,
Mm-hmm.
and break down the meaning of lease option by defining the individual words.
Perfect.
And this is important because this is the crux of how you make a lot of money without putting money into real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So an option, also known as an option agreement, is a financial contract that gives the buyer the right. Got something flying around my face. Sorry. It's annoying. I can start over. An option agreement is a financial contract that gives the buyer the right, but not the obligation, to purchase a said piece of property at a predetermined price within a certain time frame. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you want to say that differently than I just said, or was that okay?
No, it's okay. Well, it doesn't hurt to go twice. So, I mean, the word option means you can, but you don't have to.
Okay.
You can do something like you go buy food. You have an option of side dishes, this, that, or the other. You pick. But in this case, you can buy the house, but you don't have to buy the house. You have an agreement that says so. And then, you make a certain amount of time. How long? 90 days, 5 years, whatever time you agree to. And you pick the price.
So you bring up a good point, because option in the English language means choice, right? You have a choice.
Yeah.
In real estate, that means you have a choice on whether you can buy the house or not, but it's under a legal obligation. Okay. So in other words, it's kind of like in the stock market. Like in the stock market, they do that quite a bit. Like if you don't have, you want to buy a $400 stock, right? And you don't have $400, you could pay $10 for an option to purchase it, what gives you the right to buy it or not buy it. So if the stock goes up tomorrow and you can make money off of it, then in that particular case, you would want to buy it. But if the stock goes down tomorrow and you don't want to buy it, you don't owe $400. You didn't lose $400. You lost $10.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So an option is a very specific term in real estate and in the stock market. Now, yeah. I'm not here even pretending like I know anything about stock market or want to teach you about it. But if you're curious, it's called put in calls. Mm-hmm. Put in calls. That's what an option is in real estate. It's put in calls, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a put is when you're going to purchase, and a call is when you're going to back out. But I'm not 100% sure of that. So, right. So here's what happens. Once you get an option agreement, to consummate it, which means make it legal, you have to use legal tender. And the definition of legal tender is paper money. So the lowest denomination you could use is $1. I used for a very long time $10. We now use $100. I used to use cash. I now use checks, so I have records of it. Mm-hmm. Right? And believe me, that's more annoying than you care to think, because some people do not cash the checks and you don't have evidence that it's there, that they cashed it and it's there. So you got to give them the lecture of, you got to cash the check.
That's
They
fun.
they call that negotiating in legal terms. You have to negotiate the check because that's what makes the contract real. Okay. So what happens is this money that you're giving the seller to consummate the deal is called a non-refundable option fee,
Mhm.
right? For having the right to purchase the property. So that means you tie up a piece of property, right? For that low amount of money. Okay. So if the buyer decides to exercise the option and purchase the property, the option fee goes towards the purchase price,
Sure.
right? And if the buyer decides not to purchase the property, the seller keeps the non-refundable deposit or the non-refundable option fee.
Yep.
Okay. So that is miraculous in real estate because you can make a whole living off of just doing that.
Yeah, it's amazing because with could be $10 or 50. I've done 20, done 100. 100 looks less cheap. It looks like you're kind of real. But that's in the scheme of things, for an investment to make money, $100 is a joke.
Right.
Like $100. Like, yeah, duh. You spend that going to a concert. Grow up. It's and it gives you the opportunity to buy it. But if something doesn't work, it's like, oh, okay, it doesn't work. And it's a good way to test if a property might sell or not.
So that's right. So that's exactly right, Peter. That's a great thing to bring up.
Yeah, believe me, because I've been through that. When I had a house last year, and even with our friend realtors, is the house should sell for such and such. Okay, so I grabbed it, got it ready to sell, and the number wasn't right for folks for some reason. Like, didn't work out, so I handed it back. What did I lose?
Right.
I learned so much. It was worth what I learned in that. To go through that whole thing, it wasn't hard. It was close to me. It was a great cycle. I learned from it, and next time through, I'll be a little sharper in how I do it. But it wasn't a risk. I didn't miss one night of sleep. What if it doesn't sell? I'll give it back.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
And usually it works out. If it doesn't, you just give it back, and it's not a problem. Because the biggest thing people have is fear, right? And what if? What are you worried about?
Right.
The 100 is spent. Take it or leave it now. If it works, you make a bunch of money. If you don't, you learn something.
The biggest thing is people have fear. I think the biggest thing is people don't have confidence. That's worse than fear.
They go pretty much hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have confidence, you'll be afraid.
So we covered this whole option thing in episode number 362, how creative real estate actually works. Right. But the big thing is the definition of creative real estate, right? So Bill's definition of creative real estate is regular real estate. We got to move on here. I'm diverting. Regular real estate is just the house and the edifice and what it looks like and the mechanicals and what it's worth. It's a physical, materialistic object that you're paying for, like a car. How many scratches does it have? How many miles does it have? How good does it look? Does the transmission work? Do the brakes work? You will get an inspection. A house is the same way, right? But so that's why you need money. So the reason why I say real estate is made to take money out of it, which I'm going to cover this in a bit, so you're going to hear this again. But the reason why I say real estate is made to take money out of it is because there's already money in the real estate, and you're just leveraging that money. And creative real estate is all about controlling what controls the real estate. In this particular case, an option agreement would control real estate, right? For $100. All right. So a lease is a legal agreement that allows the lessee or the tenant, the person living in the house, to use and occupy a property owned by another party. Okay.
And that would be the lessor.
Yeah, or the landlord.
Yeah.
Right. For a predetermined period of time in exchange for regular payments. So in my private seminars and coaching calls, basically the lease allows the person to use the property. They have no other rights other than to just use the property.
Yep.
They can't do repairs. They can't, well, they can, but they're on a short leash.
They're not going to make major changes to the property because they don't own it.
And they don't get principal reduction. They don't get tax benefits. They have nothing other than the use of the property. Right? All they have is the property usage. So I've said it 4 times, so I think you get it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I personally have a question. Is there a difference between when we say rent and when we say lease? And I really don't know, because I don't know if they're interchangeable, if there's any big difference.
Good job, Peter. Let me read the next sentence in my notes. Now, let's discuss the difference between leasing and renting.
Folks, I don't have a script. I'm really just asking a question here. That means I'm actually following along. I understand so far. Oh my God. Yep. I'm getting to understand this real estate stuff. So
renting is usually referred to as a shorter term of time. Usually, like 6 months to a year.
Right.
It is usually a very general and broad agreement. A lease, on the other hand, is a specific type of rental agreement that is usually for longer periods of time, usually years at a time. Lease terms are usually fixed and cannot be changed unless both parties agree. When these changes are done, it is typically called a novation.
What's the word?
Novation.
Novation. Ah.
Yeah, which is a problem because I know Pace Morby teaches novations in a different way. I'm not sure how he came up with that, but a novation means that if you have a lease, if you're the seller and I have a lease with you, and then I sublease it to somebody else, if the subleaser defaults, I'm still in the daisy chain and I'm still responsible to make sure those payments and the obligations to you are met.
Right, because it's a sublease. It's under the first lease person.
A novation means that we can rewrite the lease. And it's not rewrite. You can keep the same lease in place. You just change the names and take me out of the chain.
So I've never heard the word before, but I'm guessing Nova actually means new. Nova.
I didn't look it up. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but from my Italian background and whatever, Nova, Latin or whatever, means new. So it's like something new probably happening.
Yeah. So basically, it takes the names and changes them around, but keeps and all 3 parties have to agree upon it.
Right. Okay.
So that and I know and I'm not picking on Pace Morby because I guess he's got attorneys. He teaches it a lot, but I know that I've spoken to my lawyer. I've spoken to 2 lawyers actually, and I researched it, and I know they have a different way of doing it where you sign a contract with the person and you go do the renovations and then you get to keep the equity and all that. I would not do that because I'd be afraid of equity stripping. I've been sued for equity stripping before, so.
Which means making too much money on a deal and kind of screwing the seller.
No, it just means that the seller felt like you stole their equity from them and you're making money off of their equity.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You got too much out of the deal and he feels robbed somehow.
Well, you're saying too much out of the deal. That's not the case. It's not too much. You just got anything out of the deal. It was all theirs. The equity is theirs and you took it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be too much. It could be anything.
Well, I mean, in a transaction, I just think like they expect you're going to get something.
Yeah, well,
like, he got something. Joe, I'm in business, but okay.
Right. So when we put these 2 agreements together, right, into one concept, we call this a lease option, or a lot of times it's called a lease to purchase, right? Which means the buyer, not the tenant, has the legal right by predetermined agreement to occupy the property until they decide to execute the option to buy. Okay. So I use these words carefully, so I'm going to take a few minutes to go over this. okay? Because we need to dig into this a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, and here's the reason why. Because what I said was, which means the buyer, not the tenant, has the legal right to buy, right? So an option has the right to buy, but not the obligation, like I just explained. Our leases have the right to occupy, but not the landlord obligations.
We don't have to be landlords. Fix
So
things.
when I buy from you, I tell you I'm going to do all the repairs, I'm going to cut the grass, I'm going to plow the snow, I'm going to do all that, right? I actually, when I assign you the lease and assign you the option agreement, right? I'm assigning you those obligations as well.
Right. Me being the new buyer. Or the tenant buyer. Yeah.
Right. And this is where most get really confused.
Really?
Yeah, because it frustrates me a bit because it's a little thing to switch in your head, but it takes some people a long time to do that. This reminds me of when I first started real estate. I used Ron LeGrand's Mayo formula, which is maximum allowable offer. And that's for ugly houses, which is the after renovated value. In other words, once it's all fixed up, the value times 70% minus repairs is the Mayo formula. So I used that formula as that formula. And it took me probably several years, it took me several years to realize, oh shit, that's a cash offer too. It's not just for ugly houses. You could use the Mayo formula on pretty houses. Right? This concept is the same thing. It took me a while to get it, so it doesn't surprise me that it takes our listeners a while to get this concept, right?
Yeah.
So we're not renting with an option bolted to it like a sidecar on a motorcycle, right? There's a big difference, right? We're selling the property first and allowing them to occupy it second.
You know what? I've never heard you say that before, but that makes a lot of sense. Because they're not just leasing it to somebody then, gee, I wonder if they're going to buy it. No. Are you going to buy it? Good. Now you can lease it while you're doing that.
It's a mindset, because if you put a tenant in there that expects you to fix their toilet, they're going to be disgruntled every time the toilet plugs up and you don't help them.
Yeah.
Or if they go in with a mindset that they're buying the property, I mean, it's no different than renting a car, right? You go on vacation, you rent a car. So yeah, you're going to put gas in it. Yeah, maybe you'll wash it if you went through the woods and you like trashed it up, but probably not. Yeah. You're definitely not going to change the oil. You're definitely not going to tune it up. You're definitely not going to put tires on it unless you blow one out.
And I'm not even vacuuming it.
Yeah, nothing, right? But if you own the car, you'll do all those things, won't you?
Okay.
See the difference? So this concept is very big. Many coaching clients do that. They take the concept of a rent to own, right? And they think that they're getting so the renter believes that he's renting, has all the rights of a renter, and they have this added agreement of, well, if I decide I want to buy it, I'll buy it. If I don't, no big deal.
So everything's in their favor, the best of all worlds.
So they think.
Yeah,
well, that's not the case.
Not if we write the deal, because we have to protect ourselves and not make life hard for us. It's a great opportunity for somebody who can't buy a house for whatever reason to have a lease for a while and get get to the point where they can buy it. That's a fabulous opportunity. It's just a great opportunity for them. So
we
appreciates it.
We sell the house first.
Yeah.
And then we say, okay, you don't have the money, no problem. We'll let you rent it until you do get the money.
Yeah.
So we're like an intermediate mortgage. You have to understand this. This is a small point that I'm belaboring because so many, almost one for one, think of it the other way. Wow. For example, if we rent first and sell later, I have very many of my coaching clients that when I use formulas like the MAP formula, which is I described in episode number 364, is your maximum allowable payment. That formula is income times 85% minus taxes, insurance, and HOA if they have one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you determine a payment, right?
Yeah, for between us and the seller, what we can afford to pay him.
Right. The problem is income. So most of my students will go to Rentometer and say, what is the income? What is the potential income? Yeah. And they'll go to Rentometer or one of those tools and see how much it rents for. What's the common rent in that area?
Mm-hmm.
And it's wrong. You can't do that. Okay? You can't use the rent. Let me catch up to my notes here.
Mm-hmm.
So if we sell first, right, and allow leasing until they can get the dough to pay us off, we now use a mortgage calculator for the income.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That calculates the correct amount. Plus, if you do it the way I do it, you add a few $100 above the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it motivates the buyer to get a favorable mortgage and reduce the monthly amount by hundreds. So let's say I'm selling a $200,000 house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm selling a $200,000, I want to make sure I'm on my notes here. So because when I don't read the before it, I kind of go off and get ahead of myself. So if you're selling a $200,000 house and with the taxes and the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, we'll say the payment is $1,400.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I do is I use the $200. I don't take the deposit money or the down payment money off of that number.
200,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So if they're going to give me 10% down, like 10,000 now and 10,000 in down payment assistance, which is monthly, right, above and beyond their lease, right. So I don't take that money off. So I just put $200,000 in the mortgage. I use the current interest, which nowadays is 7%, right? And I use the current interest, and I figure the payment. Yep. So it comes out to be, we'll say $1,500.
Okay.
I automatically add $200 to it. So the rent, the lease amount will be $1,700.
Right.
And I tell them literally, I mean, I'm a little bit crude about it, but I tell them there's $200 in here for the big fat landlord. That's me.
Yeah.
So if you want to and the reason why I do this is because if they're higher than the mortgage amount, they'll be motivated to go get a mortgage and cash me out because their monthly payment will go down $200, $300, $400.
Mm-hmm.
If I do it the other way around and I use Rentometer, then what happens is the rent is lower than their mortgage, and it will be difficult to get them to go get a mortgage and increase their mortgage by $400.
Yep.
Right. So it's a built-in system.
No, it makes sense. It's logical.
Yeah. All right. So I hope that made sense. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if this isn't all practical information, it's time to peel back and show you all the treasures. So this is all good stuff we've been talking about, and it's very good conversation. But how do we make money out of real estate without putting money into it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? First, you have to know this. We have 4 different ways of using this option concept, or this lease option concept.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So number 1 is what we call a slot deal. Okay, and that means a sandwich lease option transfer. So the sandwich means that we get a lease option from our seller, and we find a buyer that's going to take that lease option. So the seller is a piece of bread, the buyer is a piece of bread, and we're in the middle making money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's why they call it a sandwich lease option.
Yep.
Okay. I never looked at the history of how that came about, but I will someday and let you know. So here's what happens. A slot deal was designed for you to overpay for the property. A slot deal is designed not overpay, pay the full asking price.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that have property that they own that they owe as much as that it's worth.
Mm.
Especially in today's environment, post COVID, after COVID, right, where the properties were just inflated, right, and now the prices are going down, and they're not going to get them appraised for what they paid for.
Right.
So slot deals are going to become very popular because of that reason, because they're going to owe more or owe what it's worth. So normally an investor would be, because you say the only two ways to make money with real estate is with the equity, buy low, sell high, or cash flow, right?
Right.
Well, you're not doing either with a slot deal. What you're doing in a slot deal is we'll pay 100% of the property value without a discount, and we'll wholesale that deal to a buyer for 5 or 10% of what we promised to pay the seller.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a $200,000 house, we can sell it for $220,000.
Yep.
The reason why is because if you bought my computer today and paid me $1,000 and you gave me cash, right, you'd be paying me $1,000. But if you bought my computer today for $1,000 and swiped your credit card, right, you were the one that figured this out. You swiped the credit card, right, and paid over 24 months, you're no longer paying $1,000 for the computer. You're paying 24 months plus the interest or whatever you got to pay over the 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't make this. This is not like we're stealing from this buyer or from the seller or anything. This is just the American way.
Well,
right?
It's just like with a mortgage. The $200,000 house is $350 because you have to pay for the benefit of being allowed to wait to get the thing paid off and make these payments. But tell people why some buyer would come along and pay more than it's worth. Who would be crazy enough to do that? Because when I first heard that, it's like, yeah, but who's going to do that? Who would do that?
Well, the guy that doesn't have the money. The guy doesn't have the money. And he probably, like I've got a lot of people in houses. I've had him in there. I've got one guy that's been in my house 5 years. He moved out of a foreclosure into my house. He was a contractor, fell off a roof, broke his back or something like that. He couldn't work for a year, and they took his house.
Yeah.
He's back to work now. He's completely healthy. He's fine, right? But here's the thing. If you lose your house or there's a problem and you're living in your mother-in-law's basement, and your kids are in a school that you don't like, they're coming home and they're saying things that you're not fond of, that motivates people to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not taking advantage of them, by the way, because we're giving them an opportunity they normally couldn't get, because realize we have a system that will help them fix their problems.
Right.
So while they're renting from us, we're also giving them the opportunity to fix their credit or their down payment amount, or, a lot of times they're new businesses, they need tax returns. There's all different reasons why someone needs time to get a mortgage. And we give that to them while they're living in the house. Plus, while they're living in the house, they get to test drive it. They get to test drive the neighborhood, the schools, the taxes, all of it, right? So what happens is with a slot deal, so let's say we take a $200,000 house, right?
Yep.
This is why I say this is creative real estate, because creative real estate, you control what controls the real estate. So now watch this. Take a $200,000 house. Seller owes $200,000. They know if they go to sell this property, they're going to have to pay closing costs, which is 12 to 15%. So at 15%, that means they need to come up with $30,000 at the closing to be able to pay off the mortgage. They don't have it, or they don't want to.
Yeah, either way is not a good deal.
Right. You now come along and you say to them, "I'll pay that. I'll take your house over for 2 years." For $200,000, but you got to have a delayed cash out. That means you got to wait 2 years, because I need to go get a buyer that's willing to rent from you, take all the landlord obligations away from you. They cut the grass, plow the snow, they do everything. We're going to get them qualified for a mortgage. They're going to give you the $200,000. Now there is some closing costs. There's going to be a 1 to 3% closing cost, but that's better than 15%.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. We bought this option agreement from the seller for $100.
Mm.
We sold it to the buyer because we sold the house for 220 and they need 10% down, which is 20,000. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll often take half of it, 10 grand down, and then we'll allow them to pay over the next 24 months, allow them to pay monthly above and beyond their rent towards the down payment.
Mm-hmm.
So we bought an option agreement for $100 and we sold it for 20,000. Or 10,000 or 5,000 or 3,000 or 6,000, whatever number you want.
Mm-hmm.
We assigned our rights to that seller. From that seller to the buyer,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know how to find that deal, because they aren't listening to a podcast like you are today.
Yep.
Right. So that's what I say. You can make a lot of money. See, the seller already put the money in the deal. The 200,000 is already in the deal. You're just leveraging that money by controlling the property. Number two, you could just use a plain old option, because we're talking about the different ways you can use option agreements, right?
Yeah.
Where you get a 10% discount, right? And then you go sell above what's promised. So let's take the $200,000 house. You get a $200,000 house, right? The seller knows they're going to have to pay 15%, which is 30 grand.
Yep.
Maybe it's 10%. It's still 20 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that's the real price of price of the house being sold. It's 10% off the top.
Right. So here's the amazing thing with an option is you can do an option, and if they go to a realtor later, you just tell the realtor, okay, I have an option with this guy, so you have to make them exclusive, which means if you're there first and they sign the option with you, and then the realtor then signs on later on, it's a battle between who sells first on who she's going to pay or he's going to pay the commission to.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no reason why a seller would want to do this. Now watch this. You get 10% discount, right? So 10% of 200,000 means you paid 180 on the option, right?
Sure.
Imagine this. You go put that house on the market for $185,000 now and make $5,000 for just shuffling paperwork.
Yeah.
The realtor's going to put it on for 200 or 210. So who do you think is going to get the deal?
He's going to start at 210 to look like he's the hero. And then when it doesn't sell, he'll go down to 25, 199, 191. And you got it sold already for 185 or 187, 188, whatever you think is.
The point is that you're paying $100 for this option agreement and having the ability to go you could sell it for 190. It's as long as you sell it below market value and still make your option fee. Don't get greedy. Don't put it up for 200 and compete with the realtor, because why would you do that? You're not going to sell it. You have to be the low number. And by the way the market has been since COVID, a lot of these deals actually have bidding wars.
Oh, easily. Yeah, you can come in at anything.
You list at 185, next thing you know, you're selling for 205.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that doesn't happen in every environment, but that's the reason why you want to do options. And options, as you are aware, because you've mentioned this to me, options are only done in certain cycles. We don't use plain options very much. Right. So it just so happens in this market, you usually use options in appreciating markets, meaning you buy today for 199, it's worth 205 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. All right, good. Number 3, we're talking about different ways you can use options. We call this rent to own. This is the sandwich lease option, just like in the slot deal, the sandwich lease option deal. But instead of paying the full asking price, we're going to get a 15% discount, and we're going to get 5 to 10%. We're going to get a 15% discount and a 20 to 25% cash flow.
Right.
So here's what happens. You're talking to somebody that, like a free and clear owner, a person has no mortgage, you might have to do a lease option with them because they want 200,000. They're not willing to come off their price. They want 200,000. So you say, okay, well, I could do the deal, and you would go do a sandwich lease option. Here's how it works. If you want 200,000 because it's worth 200,000, all the money is on your side. No problem. I need a 2-year delay to give you the money. What do you mean? I'm going to go get a renter, and we're going to get them qualified, and they're going to pay you the money. So you can get your 200, but you got to wait 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, okay, I can do that. Right. Then you go through the process with them. And one of the things they'll say is, I'll be like, okay, so I'm going to find you this buyer and you're going to collect payments every month. Now, there's no landlord agreements. I mean, no landlord obligations, but you're going to have to, you're going to have to, every month, you're going to have to get your payments. You're going to have to pay the turn. You're going to have to pay the taxes. You're going to have to pay the insurance. You're going to have to pay all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you're still in the deal. Oh, I don't want to be in the deal. So I immediately say to them, well, I could do a rent to own with you. Well, what do you mean? Well, if you allow me 15% worth of equity and 20 or 25% worth of cash flow, I will do all that work for you. I'll manage the property.
Mm.
And it's an easy conversation. And now all of a sudden you're on a $200,000 house, you just made 30 grand and you're probably making $400 or $500 a month in cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But the seller already has the money in the deal. You get it? It's free and clear. They already paid for the property. You're leveraging their position.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to rent to you on a rent to own with no landlord obligations because you're promising to take care of all the maintenance. You're promising to worry about the smoke detectors, the batteries in the smoke detectors, and you're worried about the grass and the snow and the yada, yada, yada. If the neighbor's dog poops on the lawn, you get the phone call, not him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah, they don't like the aggravation to get to the point.
The interesting thing is you make all those promises to the seller and then you assign them to your buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Like all you have to do to say to the seller is, let me ask you a question. If your front porch light doesn't work, would you call the bank and ask them to come fix it?
Mm-hmm.
When you had a mortgage, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your toilet overflows, would you call your bank and tell them to come unplug it? Mm-hmm. If the guy for the lawn doesn't show up, would you call them and say, come cut the grass?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, no, right? Well, that's the position I'm going to put you in. Nobody's calling you. You're just the bank. You're the money guy.
Yeah, and there's another question you have too, like mindset-wise, perhaps, is what's it worth to them to not have to do all that stuff each month?
Yeah.
Oh, $200, $300, $400. And that's what we would be getting in the cash flow, for example, or some of the equity, because anything that is a benefit, money exchanges somehow.
Yeah, we do that in the MAP formula I was just talking about, the maximum allowable payment, which is done on free and clear properties because there is no mortgage. So we take the income, we multiply it by 85%, minus the taxes, minus the insurance and HOA if they have them. So let's say that comes out to be $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that means the seller is making $1,000 gross profit or net profit. Net profit,
right,
on this property every month.
Mm-hmm.
So I say to you, okay, Peter, so you're collecting $1,600 or $1,700. By the time you pay the taxes and insurance and you put the vacancy factor, which is the 15%, because if you do times 85%, that means you're doing a 15% vacancy factor, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that means that you're getting $1,000 a month. How much is it worth to you to keep getting money but not have the landlord obligations?
Right.
200, 300, 400. How much is that worth to you? And that gets you your discount.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So the fourth way we can use an option, is this being helpful? Is this okay? Is this not too?
Yeah. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I got listeners out there, send me some. Yeah, I think I do. I haven't been paying attention to who's listening. Send me some hearts or send me some love or something if you can, or make a comment or something if this is helpful. Okay. So number 4, the fourth way you can use an option, which is what we've been talking a lot about, is when we buy something with one of our other strategies, like owner financing or taking over a mortgage payment subject to, or just plain old lenders like banks or hard money or private money or any of that kind of stuff. Once we acquire the property on long enough term, I'm not talking about a 12-month term. Right? I'm talking about a 5 to 7 to 10 year time period.
Mm-hmm.
We sell on rent to own or lease option.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another place we use that. Now, I'm not going to cover that today, but there is a huge profit in that because you make the big point about how when you're flipping property, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes 6 months. It
Yeah.
takes a year.
At
You
least.
get no pay.
Yeah.
Right?
Wait.
So
You wait.
the
You spend.
the part
You spend.
the part that I don't understand is why a realtor wouldn't do this to get their commissions.
Hmm.
Right? So why wouldn't a realtor fill their pipeline up with rent to owns
Short-sightedness.
to get their commissions? Yeah, it's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Because when you do it this way, there's a minimum of 5 profits instead of just getting 1 profit. Right? And you make a lot of money, a lot more money when you sell in a rent to own.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of interesting. So the point is we sell on a lease option. This is how we retire early, because that's where we get money now, which is the deposit money, which, by the way, that money pays down your debt and pays for your vacations and pays for the new car and kids' graduations and college funds, whatever you want to do. Money now.
Chunks of money.
Chunks of dough. Debt. Yeah. And then money monthly is your income. That's how you're going to fire your boss or quit your current income. And money later is your retirement. That's where you're going to get, 20, 30, 50, 100, $200,000 worth of equity on one deal.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I have a property that I bought that we talk about quite a bit. And I bought that property and I bought it for, I bought it for 110, borrowed 125. I made $7 or $8 grand at the closing. Right. Then I turned around and got a lease option for 10 grand. So at that point I had 17 grand the first month. And I bought it with a private lender. That private lender still holds that property. I sold it to my buyer for 240. I think the last time I checked, that property is worth like 450, which is why I say I make more money when they default than when they pay me.
Yeah.
And when you have that idea in your head with these deals, because I've already made a shit. Plus, he's been in there, I think, 4 years, and I make $1,000 a month.
Yeah,
so it's another 50 grand. So I made 70 grand on this house, and I still own it because I sold it on a lease option. And I think it went up $200,000 in equity.
Yeah, that's
so I'm hoping this guy. I cross my fingers, hoping this guy he defaults, because I'll just go in there, clean it up, and sell it for the new price.
But how long was your agreement with him?
2 years.
So legally, you could evict him if he doesn't do it. But I mean, for you, you're getting $1,000 cash every month. So, and the more you hold it, the more the value goes up. So,
yeah, and even if because I got $100,000 worth of equity with him, but the point is, and you've asked me this, why don't you sell it? Well, because what am I going to do with the 100 grand? I have to go find another house and employ that house or buy 2 more houses, and that's not always so easy. So, all right, so money now, money monthly, money later.
Yep.
Right. That's how you're going to retire early. Okay. Now that we have done some digging and found the treasure, let's open the chest up and look at the gold.
Hey, I have one question. Maybe it's an observation. There's the 4 ways we could use the option. Okay.
Yep.
So does that mean then you could buy a house or control it with an option and decide later how you want to exit?
Yep.
Right. So you don't have to know going in what's going to work. You can get it and have 4 ways to unload it.
Well, the thing that we do now, which Sean actually came up with, which is my other partner, and you mentioned it earlier, is the best thing that any rookie could do is because how do you know how much a house is worth? We're way off track here. Oh man, we got 10 minutes to go and I got 20 minutes worth of notes. The only way that you know how much to sell a house for is by what a buyer is going to pay you. So that's the biggest thing that I run into with coaching clients is, well, what's it worth? What's worth what somebody's willing to pay for?
Yeah. So
how do you know that? The option agreement is that way. So if you're not sure which deal to do, subject to owner financing, slot deal, you're not sure what to do, just sign a 30-day lease agreement. I mean, a 30-day option agreement with the seller, put it on Zillow, put it on Facebook Marketplace, put it on apartments.com, and advertise it, house for sale, no bank qualifying. And then get a buyer. Now you have the buyer's money and the seller's money, and there should be a difference. In other words, the buyer's money should be higher than the seller's money. Now you decide which deal you can do. You go back to the seller and you say, I have this buyer, here's what we can do. If they don't like it or there's a problem, you put $100 in and you're done. But what an amazing lesson that is, to find out who your seller is and find out what you can and can't do, because that's what everybody's worried about is what if I buy this house and I get stuck with it? Well, you don't, with an option agreement, you don't have to do that. The only thing you're stuck with is the $100 deposit.
Cost of doing business. Hey, you know what else is funny? I better stop because we're getting behind. But the advertising that we do, the slogan, house for sale, no bank qualifying.
Right.
So I was going to mention that before, because it's not house for lease if you want to buy it. It's house for sale. So it starts off as a sale, your original point.
Right.
Then the lease happens once you have the buyer.
So I'm going to belabor this point because I want to make sure it is settled in the minds of our listeners, because this is something that most people, I've never heard anybody say it until I said it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not being arrogant or pompous or anything like that. I've just never heard it. So if you have heard it and somebody else is saying it, I would love for you to send me a support ticket, because I'd like to go watch their materials.
Yeah.
Right?
Who said it first?
Yeah. when I say you don't need to put money into real estate, but instead take money out, here's what I mean. The seller already has that money in the property. Whether it's free and clear or a mortgage or however they have it, someone they inherited it. It doesn't matter. The money's there. So the way to take money out of real estate and not put money into it is to leverage that money. What we're doing is we're showing the seller how they, because a lot of times we'll talk to an investor and they'll be like, I want to sell it because I want to go, I'm 300 miles away and I want to buy a house closer to mine. I want to sell that property and I want to buy another investment property closer to mine. I'm like, well, why? Because you have this property already. So basically what you're saying is you want to keep making money from real estate without being a landlord, or you want to be a landlord closer to you. So the landlord obligations are your problem, not the money. So what if we take that money and we turn it into a profit for you? What if I showed you how you could take a $200,000 house and make $168,000 with that over the next 5 years? They listen.
Yeah.
And when I show them all the ways that they could make money, with saving the closing costs and the cash flow and the IRS depreciation and all the different ways that we make money, the appreciation, all these ways that they make money, it literally on a $200,000 house is $168,000. So now they're selling a house for $368, not $200. Right. So most people don't know that. It's not talked about enough. Right.
Sure.
So time equals money, right? And that's creative real estate, right? Is leveraging the money that's already in the property. See, creative real estate is all about using what controls the property, like I told you before, not the property. You don't want the property. Nelson Rockefeller said the way you become wealthy and keep wealth is to don't buy anything but control everything. This is what he's talking about.
Yep.
Right? So that's why lease options, like we've been talking about today, are so important, because it's an easy device to learn how to control real estate. Right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we end off here today, let's look at some pros and cons of this strategy.
Sure.
Okay, so number one, why would a seller do the deal? Well, the first and best answer is profit. They also sell quick. They get a quicker sale.
Yeah.
They also don't have closing costs. We get the buyer to pay the closing costs, not the seller. See, in the realtor system, the seller pays the closing costs. It should really be the buyer paying the closing costs, right? So in podcast number 360, are you ever tongue-tied when talking to real estate sellers? You'll hear us talking about these extra points, how they make all this money. You and I did a whole podcast on it. And at the end of the podcast, I actually did a role play for a half an hour with you that you don't probably know this, because I don't tell you a lot of times because I forget when we're talking. I've got amazing reviews from that. I mean, it's probably one of the most viewed podcasts we have right now. I know
Well,
it is on YouTube.
It was very, very practical hearing
Yeah.
you handle me as a seller, because you can
Right.
talk about this all day, but like, what do you actually say with words one after the other? And if he says this, just to hear you do that is priceless. So it doesn't surprise me.
Thank you. So it's a conversation with the seller, telling them if they keep the property, you can make all this money, right? Now, not all sellers are going to want that. Some sellers have other reasons. I don't want the property. You know, my mom died in it, and I don't want to be attached to it. Or there's all kinds of other things. But it definitely converts a lot of I want cash only. It converts those people because their greed glands come out, right?
Yeah.
And one of the clinchers that I use on most of my strategies is math. You know, on most of my deal closes, the clincher is the math, right? All right, number 2. Hopefully I answered that. What if the buyer doesn't execute the option? Right? So I laugh out loud with that one. Well, we do it again and make another non-refundable deposit. And they make more money. See, the statistics are suppressed because right now, and I say right now because someday I plan on changing this, but right now, there's a monopoly. There's a real estate monopoly. And that's what next week's podcast is going to be about. And we're going to do remember the dealing with the real estate mafia? We did that like episode number 50. We're going to do that. We're going to do that at podcast number 366.
The mafia's back, huh?
Yeah, the real estate mafia, right?
Hey, I resemble that remark.
Yeah. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that when you want to sell a house, there's only one game in town. That's the realtor system. There is no other way, or sell it on your own.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like saying I'm sick and there's only one doctor I can go to, or one hospital. Right. It's a monopoly.
Yeah.
Right. So they suppress all this stuff because they make their money with money brought to the table.
That makes us the rebels, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, like Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, that's us, man.
So all these numbers and all these things that we're talking about on creative real estate, people don't normally know them because there's not enough of us doing it the correct way.
Yeah. Well, we're not organized. We're just like really individual, like rebel cells.
So I do believe that before I go under the grass, there will be some organization with that, but we'll see what happens. All right, number 3. So number 2 was if they don't execute the option, you just do it again and make more money. What most people don't know, which is why I went off on that tangent, I almost forgot. I'm glad I went back. Like there's a statistic. There's statistics for everything because there's probably tens of thousands of houses every week sold in the United States. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of houses. This is not a new concept. We've been doing this for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So it's been around for a long time.
Yeah. So
I talk to old guys, old brokers. Like, oh, we used to do that all the time in the old days. We still do.
So the statistics are there. So one of the statistics are national average, and it's been this way for 100 years, is that the price of a house increases by 3% a year. That's an average statistic, right? Up markets, down markets, whatever. They go up about 3% a year, right? So the interesting thing is that if somebody saved their profit until 5 years from now, that means the price of the house went up 15%.
Yeah.
So even if it's a bad market and went up 7.5%, who cares? It went up. Right. So that's just a little taste of that. So number 3, what if the buyer does damage? Well, we fix it. Reason why is because we're going to get 3, 5. Well, I don't let anybody house less than 5%, less than 3%, but 5% is like the hardcore. Lately, I ask for 10%, which I never did before. I just started doing the last couple of years. I ask for 10% because I want to have down payment assistance, because down payment assistance is above and beyond. So if the rent is $1,500, they pay $1,500 in one check, and then I get another $200 a month for the down payment assistance, which is $2,400 a year, which is another $5,000 at the end of 2 years. What that does is it takes my average profit from we'll say $300 to $500, or from $500 to $700, which is why I average $800 to $1,000 per deal.
Cash flow.
Cash flow.
Crazy. And it benefits the buyer because when he goes to get the mortgage, he already has more money down, doesn't borrow as much. So his payments are a little better off. So he's not losing anything. He just has to borrow more down payment for him. It's good.
So here's my point: is the down payment money. What you do is your first couple deals, they suggest that you keep that money, you don't spend it, and you put $10,000 or $20,000 in a savings account. Right, your first couple of deals, right, and you put that money in a savings account. So if there is a problem, like somebody does damage, you have a reserve. Once you, and then after that, then you put 50% in for a little while. And then once you get a cushion, depending on how many houses you have, you got a cushion of 20 or 30 grand, and you only have a few houses, you're covered.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can start keeping the money. But I suggest you do that in the beginning so if somebody does damage, you fix it because you have the money. Right. So like I said, there's a difference between renting and owning. Right. Yeah. So a lot of people are expecting to buy the property, so they aren't going to damage it, right? So those are cons. What are some of the pros? You'll never have any trouble finding buyers. One of the things I teach my coaching clients is I'll say to them, when you're talking to your sellers, say, well, I have like about 80 people on my list that I can sell a house to. And they're like, but Bill, I don't have a list. Oh, that's simple. Just go put an ad up for a house for sale, no bank qualifying, and in a week you'll have 80 people.
Yeah.
Because who advertises that? You on Facebook and put house for sale, right? And I don't do it on Marketplace anymore. What you need to do is you need to go in the buy sell sites for Facebook, like we'll say for Dallas, Texas. Go into Dallas, Texas on Facebook, and there's buy sell sites. The other one is estate sites. The other one is, when I say sites, I mean groups, right?
Yeah, Facebook groups for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So another one would be tag sales, right? Tag sale groups. So you get in those groups and you get accepted, and you can put a house for sale, no bank qualifying. You'll have more leads, you know what to do with.
No, the few times I've done it already, people call all the word work because there's a lot of people, like about 80%, give or take, that can't get a mortgage. So there's a perfect opportunity for them to get a house. They freak out. Honey, we can get a house. How? Yeah. No bank qualifying.
The interesting thing is that more buyers know about it than sellers. We have to convince the seller to do it, but the buyers already know about it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, 80% of all buyers in today don't qualify in today's market, don't qualify for a mortgage. So your pool is 80%. The realtor's pool is 20%.
Yeah, plenty.
So once we advertise house for sale, no bank qualifying, then like you said, they crawl out of the wall, right? So the cool thing is, like these transactions, especially like the slot deal, are quick. So you could get a deal and close a deal within a couple of weeks. Because you're just moving paperwork around, especially if the property is vacant and the seller's hot to trot to go, get somebody in there and get their money, right? That's what they want because they're paying a mortgage, remember? They want to get relief from the mortgage, right? And remember, when the realtor sells it for them, right? Do they pay the mortgage and the taxes and the heating bill and the light bill? No. So you don't have to do that. You're going to be just like they're already used to paying all those bills. Yeah. So you just tell them when I get my buyer in there, you'll stop paying. I can do it in a month, hooray. If it takes me 3 months, then there you go. So I have that conversation when they're priced, because if they're asking $210,000 for a $200,000 house, I tell them, okay, I'm going to tell you from my experience, I'll go after the 210. I'm going to tell you right now that $10,000 you're going to spend it in holding costs while I'm trying to find the buyer. You're better off to sell for the market value and get because you're going to spend, you got a mortgage of $2,000 a month, we'll say, or $1,500 a month. You're going to spend a majority of that holding costs while I try to go find your buyer for that higher number. So why do that? Right?
Sure.
All right, good. So these transactions could be quick. Also, because they happen so fast, it's very likely you'll get a big fat profit check within 30 days. Right?
Yep.
So realize this. If you have rented a place in the past to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
like somewhere in college or, I don't know.
First got married.
Yeah, whenever you rented a place, right? You
Yeah.
know about 85 or 90% of how to do this. You don't need to have a whole bunch of training. All you need to do is understand this concepts that we were teaching you today about how you can assign these. It's wholesaling the lease options or selling them to your buyer and just getting some money in between. And you could start that way. You will not stay that way. You will not become a multimillionaire because you're not keeping the properties. But it's a good way to get started. It's a good way to get some dough in the bank, and it's a good way to pay somebody like me for education. Right? It's a wonderful thing to do. All right. So the last thing I would like to say is the document. So there's a 5-page document that I created for one of my acquisition managers because she wanted people would say to her, I want some information. So I had a website, but she didn't want to use the website. So I made this document called the Lease Option Explain. It's 5 pages. It was made to send to the seller to actually explain how a lease option works. So the big surprise is that I made that for my sellers, and she used to email it to them. Right? It now has your name on it, so it's something that you have used in the past, right? And that's in. Oh, excuse me. Well, that came out of nowhere. That's in the link in the description. Now, here's what you need to do with that. Once you get it, you download it, you handwrite it 10 times. Then you record your voice reading it into your smartphone. And then you plug it in and you listen to that puppy for a week or two. 10, 15, 20 times. You're actually brainwashing yourself to understand the lease option deal. And then what will happen is you'll actually get on the phone with a person that's renting a property and ask them, would you be willing to rent for a year or two and then sell to me? You'll notice when you're talking to the seller, like things will come out of your mouth that you didn't even know you knew because of this document. Because the document gives you all the objections, all the benefits. It shows you everything. So it's a great way for you to actually learn how to do these deals we were talking about today. So go download that document, handwrite it 10 times, and then put it in your phone, your smartphone, and plug your earphones in. So when you're cooking or exercising or walking the dog or smoking a cigar or whatever it is that you do, listen to it 10, 15, 20 times and just listen to it and listen to it and listen to it. And you will have the answers because you'll have listened to it and hand wrote it, and you'll probably be better at it than me. So there you go. We're at the end of the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your participation. Make sure you subscribe to our channel wherever you're watching us or listening to us. Make sure you give us a review or like us or dislike us, whatever you think of this podcast. And make sure you go to the description in this podcast and grab the link that I put in there for you and grab that document I was talking about. And of course, if you have any questions, go to flippinghousesforrookies.com, and which is at the top of the page, and just put a support ticket in, and I will make sure I get you the answers you need. Okay, I check it usually every day, every other day, something like that. Okay, so again, next week's podcast 366. I don't have the title written yet, but it's going to be something like how to deal with the real estate mafia. I think it's going to be fun. We're gonna have some fun on that one, Peter. All right, guys, have a good week. Flourish and prosper using real estate. Over and out.